Hey there, today I want to talk about 10 movies that I saw last year that I think are underhyped. Movies that are run the gamut from great to kind of bad, but just interesting and overall a positive experience. These are movies that just have stayed on my mind one way or another and that I don't really see anyone talking about. So let's get into it. Dead Silence. An evil ventriloquist ghost sends a mysterious dummy in a box to a young couple's apartment. One of them quickly dies, and the grief stricken survivor returns to their hometown, unearthing dark secrets, corpses with their mouths hanging way too wide open, and one of the most delightfully silly final twists in 2000's horror. This is a fun, growing pains movie for James Wan, who at this point was caught between the reputation he'd earned from Saw's gore and narrative convolutions, and the more restrained supernatural horror that he would become famous for later in his career. Whatever you do, don't scream. That's the big tagline here. That's how she kills you. Super fun, silly time. Donnie Wahlberg is in it, and he's got this electric shaver that he's just always going at himself with, no matter what the context of the scene is. Good time. Even if a lot of the acting performances here are as wooden as the dolls. The Anderson Tapes. Sean Connery tries to knock over a ritzy apartment complex in a refreshingly blue-collar heist film. They're all just thugs keeping control of the situation with the skin of their knuckles. Like a big part of the heist. It's not like playing 3D chess, Ocean's 11 style, where they've just masterminded every tiny little possible eventuality ahead of time. It's about scaring the hell out of the people who didn't leave their houses that day and keeping them away from their phones while the other guys are just ransacking the place as fast as they can. One of the most distractingly off-putting scores that I've ever heard in any movie before. Why electronic music, Quincy Jones? Why? Death Spa. There should be more movies populated entirely by hotties who casually squeeze and grope each other every time they're within each other's arm's reach. I don't really remember much about the plot of this movie except that it's like an evil spa that kills the people who are there for some reason or another. All I remember is that the hot, dumb protagonist guy at one point exclaims, "Why is your heart so full of hate?" And another point complains that his lawyer is wearing, quote, "the cutest pants I've ever seen." And he's right, they are really cute pants. All I really know is that the shower tiles are flying out of the walls and slicing up naked ladies. Why is there so much lethal shit in the sprinkler system? That pile of organs has a heart that is still beating. Oh dear. There's this split second editing speed to this thing where there's no time for thought or reaction. Something will happen and then just bam, you're in the next scene. And usually the next scene is a room full of boobs or a respectable amount of man bod ogling as well. But yeah, sexy bodies are just hurled at the viewer from every direction like some saucy opposite of a jump scare. I don't know if this is a great movie, but it's doing something right, and everything that it's doing wrong, it's doing it wrong in the right way. Inside, a pregnant woman gets a knock on the door on Christmas Eve, the night before she's about to be induced and go into labor and all that good stuff. A creepy lady wants to use her phone, but she says no, presumably because she's seen A Clockwork Orange before. She says, "No, my husband is asleep." And the creepy lady says, "Your husband has been dead for 4 months." And from there things escalate. The first 30 minutes or so of Inside are just some of the most deliciously suspenseful sequences of home invasion horror I've pretty much ever seen. What's cool about it is that it's really more of a standoff than an outright assault. For a while, it's about this, kind of tension as the invader is somewhere outside the house and she's doing whatever she can to keep the home secure. She's calling the cops and things like that. All, sort of smart things for a horror protagonist to do, which we like to see. And then later, as of course she inevitably gets in the house, it's she's barricaded in the bathroom for a really long time. All this is great. That being said, at a certain point, all that tension kind of just pops into a big, bloody, gory mess. Literal mess, as in bodies everywhere. And maybe also narrative mess in a lot of ways. It's suddenly a lot goofier of a movie, I guess, in terms of the gore, but the tone of it is still that 2000s horror, like dour seriousness. And I don't know, the relentless cruelty of what follows is nevertheless unforgettable. One of the most outright mean endings I have seen in a really long time. Yikes. The Love Parade. This movie is so exciting to think about, and because it came out at a time when not only the conventions of movie musicals weren't really set in stone yet, but the conventions of just sound in movies at all were still pretty fluid. And it's exciting to see those rules being written in real time in movies like The Love Parade. Whole sections of songs are sung while the screen is on people listening outside the room. You can almost feel them being like, oh, it's not a silent film anymore. Like we can just hear things happening over there and then see someone reacting to it over here. Like that was just this new concept. There's a part where a dog has a solo in this movie. I repeat, a dog has a solo. I don't really even know how they did it, but they do something where the dog's barks are hitting what kind of sound like the correct notes of the melody of the song. Like the first verse and the second verse has already been sung by actors, and then here comes the dog in the third verse as kind of like the final punchline, singing the same melody or barking the same melody. Incredible. And the whole thing's anchored by the hilarious and steamy chemistry of Playboy Maurice Chevalier and girl boss queen of a fictional country, Jeanette MacDonald. They fall in love and get married about halfway through, but then they're not such a great pair. They have a hard time letting go of their previous freedoms. And what can I say? The gags are relentless and joyful, as any Ernst Lubitsch fan would expect. The main characters are unapologetic horn dogs. Just be warned that the battle of the sexes at the heart of the central conflict is refreshingly sympathetic to both genders until the frankly disgusting ending. Chevalier's victorious wink to the camera in the final shot is the stuff of nightmares, and it's not supposed to be, which makes it worse. Smoke Signals. This is the first mainstream American film to be written, directed, and star Indigenous Americans, which is great. You'd think that would have happened before 1998, but that's great. This movie is about two, I believe, cousins and one of whose father abandoned the family several years ago, and they've received news that he's died, and they decide to leave their reservation to take something of a cross-country trip to pick up his remains and whatever he had left. And it's kind of the son's way of making peace with all his baggage with his father, and his nerdy buddy cousin, I think they're cousins, tags along, kind of inserts himself into it. There's a bit of a comedic dynamic there where he's getting on the other guy's nerves a lot. Whatever initial quibbles I had with the camera work in this movie, it kind of looks like this made for TV special sometimes. It was quickly, all those concerns kind of melted away, mostly by the patient warmth captured here by actor Evan Adams. His kind of relentless, nerdy smiling at first hit me as a bit too saccharine, but over time you begin to see there's like this weird wisdom to his brightness, a somewhat conscious defiance of the stoic rigidity that many in the film try to impose on him. So much of that character kind of comes down to a stubborn refusal to be defined by the kind of most tragic aspects of his culture. And so too does this screenplay. At the center of this story is the absentee father, Arnold, who we get to know in a lot of flashbacks. And, this is a guy who, in many ways, perfectly fits the stereotype of the tragic Indian. He's a raging alcoholic who berates and beats his family and then abandons them altogether. Without flinching away from that reality or making excuses for it, it also gives Arnold space to complicate that narrative. He is such a magnetic dude who has a funny little joke for almost every breath he takes. He really comes through for people sometimes. But then, in the next moment, he'll casually clock his son in the back of the head for dropping his beer. His son's utter confusion about what to make of such a father, and by extension his reservation as a whole, is really the real heart of this movie. And this quietly over time comes to infect the comedically quaint tone that dominates the aesthetics and rhythms of this movie. You go from patiently chuckling at like quirky gags of like a guy who is I guess he's a radio correspondent whose entire job is to just report on when a truck drives by his house, like that kind of hardy har stuff. You go from that to just breathlessly biting your knuckles as Victor numbly stares at the trailer where his dad spent the last years of his life without him. And so then by the time you get back to truck update guy, it's like you just want to embrace him with relief. The film's insistence on foregrounding these gentle and maybe even corny touches begin to feel like a much needed kind of forgiveness. No End in Sight. This is the third movie from 2007 on this list. I feel like the general consensus on W. Bush's invasion and occupation of Iraq at this point is some version of we never should have been there and the whole thing was doomed from the start. This documentary is about the decisions that were made in the first year or so after the invasion. And I knew the Iraq War was bad, but I had no idea just how much more badly botched it was than it really had to be. One brazen example, one of many brazen examples that this documentary trots forth, is the decision to completely disband the Iraqi military, just fire everyone. A military that before that was excited to assist in any way they could in like facilitating the transfer of power. And so, instead of having all these allies, they created 500,000 military trained enemies who now have nothing to do and no way to feed their families. Enemies who know where all of the weapons caches in Iraq are and how to access them. Caches that the Bush administration did not bother to secure because they directed all the troops to guard the fucking oil. No End in Sight tells a tale of a leadership who cannot conceive of stooping so low as to working with the population that they were supposedly there to liberate. This is a simple talking heads and B-roll kind of documentary, nothing too flashy, but hey, here we are invading another country for their oil. Yippee-ki-yay. So in light of that, I can't think of another more relevant cautionary tale for how 2026 could go than what this movie has to say. The Cat, another heist movie, yeah! This time the robbers are holed up in a bank surrounded by cops. But is there something more going on here? Are they trapped there on purpose? Well, yes they are. The real mastermind of the heist is actually in a nearby building behind a telescope and behind a serious 80s mustache and a serious German frown. And he's reporting on the cops' every movement and slowly orchestrating things towards the explosive climax. Stylish, sexy, violent, fun, out of the blue. Inside is the meanest movie on this list, but Out of the Blue is by far the most devastating. Dennis Hopper sips on a beer behind the wheel of a semi-truck, laughing with his daughter. Laughing so hard that he crashes into the side of a school bus, killing a bunch of kids. This is the first scene. The rest of the movie takes place 5 years later from the point of view of the denim-clad, rebellious tomboy daughter as her father is released from probation. The movie has been accused of being like poverty porn, and it is true that our heroine spends most of the movie trying to dodge a gauntlet of underbelly dwellers hurling drugs, booze, sexual advances, and abuse her way. And so maybe it's a fair label. She's like 15 at this point, I think. Hopper plays probably the most despicable character he's ever played, which is quite a statement, right? We've all seen Blue Velvet and whatnot. My hatred for him is inflamed by how almost good of a guy he often comes close to being. But there's just this real delicate, almost cinema verite feel to the way the camera follows this young girl through the concerts and house parties that make up her life. She's got this like punk rock facade that's hiding, this more like gentle childishness, and there's a really compassionate horror to the way we are made to witness this punk rock, not idealism, but I guess spunkiness curdle into pure nihilism. I'll never forget it. The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar and Three More. Maybe an Oscar-winning film by Wes Anderson can never properly be thought of as underhyped, but I don't know, I just feel like this came and went, and to me, it's right up there with his most beloved works. In particular, the the stylistic choice he makes for communicating the prose of the Roald Dahl stories these are based upon. He doesn't omit them, nor is it just narrated through voiceover, but by the actors on screen who they have their dialogue with each other, and then they'll snap over the camera to narrate something, then keep talking, and then narrate and talk and narrate, and there's just this electric momentum to it. And the films totally commit to this through, like, from start to finish, I believe. And this artificiality is like in artificial theatricality, I guess. And the momentum of it is enhanced by the way a lot of times the sets will change, and they'll be changed kind of like, I don't know, with stage hands, or they'll be rolled on and off the screen as if you're in the theater. It's so much fun, and there's so much energy to it, and I just feel like I'm watching the dictionary of what filmmaking can be expand before my eyes. And it feels like the kind of thing that indie filmmakers could build off of. I mean, it seems like a very comparatively affordable way to tell really big stories. Maybe not at the scale that Anderson's operating on. He clearly had quite a big budget, but I don't know, like, I've seen 99 seat theaters achieve some really grand things with small budgets, and it'd be cool to use a camera in that territory the way he does here. The shorts themselves are also just wonderfully colorful crowd pleasers whose outward charms belie darker themes, classic Wes Anderson. And the darkness in these, I think, are probably as grotesque as he has ever gone. The Roald Dahl stories are, quite dark, some of them, especially the really shorter ones. And, it's really exciting to see a filmmaker who is known at this point for densely complex nesting egg style storytelling, simplifying his usual structure for maximum clarity and impact, and not missing a step along the way. And that's what I got. I hope you like the list. Let me know if you check anything out, because God knows no one else is talking to me about these things. Yeah, and be on the lookout for my best of 2025 list, which I'm gonna make probably like shortly before Oscar time, to give myself just enough time to see more things. And in the meantime, I'm going to try to be uploading about once a week here. And yeah, 2026, let's go, let's do it.